Okay, we can begin.
I need to go through the the usual. Hi, Larry. The usual formalities. My name is Roger Boone. I'm the chair of Conwy Sacre. I can confirm that the committee officer has conducted a sound check before the meeting, so I'm presuming everybody can hear me. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, where we're all attending remotely. This meeting will be recorded and live streamed, and it will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of this meeting. Can I remind you that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice at the bottom of your screen. If you wish to speak, please use the raise the hands function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note that I might not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. All microphones will be muted. If you've indicated your intention to speak, you'll be invited to turn your microphone on. If you leave your device for any reason, can you please ensure that you're muted and turn your video off? Okay, and just to say that I'm having just got through COVID and a hospital visit with acute pancreatitis. I've just gone down with an absolutely foul cold and streaming. So if I'm not on top form today, just be a little bit flexible with me. Okay, as we go through what's a very full agenda. Okay, the appointments of vice chair. I've spoken with Julie Fallon, and she's not able to be here today, but given the importance of the partnership that we've expressed in our management team, it would be good for Julie to come on board. Of course, the elections are going to be in May, so we've no way of predicting what's actually going to happen there, but certainly I'd like to propose that Julie becomes the vice chair, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thanks, Colette. Okay, all those in favour, raise your hand.
Roger, if you just remember, we need to take a vote from each
section. Sorry, I always do that at the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, okay. Can I have the, first of all, the faith representatives? Okay, that's unanimous. And the council representative? That's Chris. Okay, and the teacher representative? Thank you, Haley. Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay. Changes, there's no urgent matters. Apologies for absence, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, apologies have been received from councillors Julie Fallon and Mary Doyle, also Reverend Sam Erlandson, Julia Buckley-Jones, and Ariane Pierce will be joining us around 2:30.
Okay. There are no declarations of interest, are there? No. There aren't any urgent matters that aren't on the agenda. Changes in membership. You've just mentioned Sam Erlandson, who's actually going to represent the diocese, I was going to call it the Anglican, the Welsh Church, and it will be the Diocese of St Asaph that he actually represents. The new representative for the Diocese of Bangor will be me, because I've switched churches. And I've just gone through that process with them. So I'm able to carry on now as chair of the committee. And we'll be looking for representatives from the United Reform and Presbyterian traditions. So what other vacancies have we actually got, Sally?
Vacancies for faith representatives. We have currently got Union of Welsh Independents, Evangelical Alliance, and English Presbyterian. Oh, that's, sorry, the one you've just said. So other than what you've just said, it's Union of Welsh Independents and Evangelical Alliance.
Okay, we need to do some follow-up on that. Okay. Right, the matters arising. Humanist representation on Sacre is actually on the agenda. update on discussion with the local authority in relationship to Conwy Sacre's management plan and the agreed syllabus conference. It's basically on the agenda, isn't it, Larry?
Apologies, Chair, we have missed minutes of the previous meeting.
Oh my.
Item
Yeah.
6.
All right. Sorry, I'm not on form. Okay. Right. Are we happy that they're correct record? Nod from Colette.
Can we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Yes, we've just had one from Colette and the second from Alan Brown.
And then we'll need to take
Okay,
each
all those in-
separately again.
Okay, faith representatives. Yep. Teacher representatives. Council.
I wasn't there, so I'll have to abstain.
Oh, okay. Well, that's unanimous then. Okay. Right, thank you for that. Sorry about that. Moving back to the matters arising. The first 3 items there are actually assimilated into the agenda. Update on the Agora qualification. Phil, you've been in touch with Libby Jones, haven't you?
Yes, the qualification is available, has been available since September as a level 1 and a level 2. It will equate to a full GCSE if pupils were to take that. There is conversation at the moment about it becoming a level 3 qualification, but it's not a priority. There are also conversations going on about the aligning of the qualification with the Curriculum for Wales guidance. So it might be it will be a qualification that pupils will be able to do Key Stage 3 currently, or whatever that would be, under the new curriculum, and then be able to do that as a Curriculum for Wales style qualification in years 10 and 11. There is a flyer that's available that we will be able to put out for schools, and a little bit later this will come out throughout the agenda, but I'll be writing the spring newsletter once we've had our agreed syllabus, because it can promote the new agreed syllabus, but I'll also advertise it or suggest it on that newsletter as well.
Yeah, one of the gaps in fact in SACRE that we haven't actually mentioned when we did that quick review was of course the secondary head teacher. And that's, you know, and particularly rolling out something like that qualification, that's going to be very useful to have someone pushing that at the meetings that they actually go to. So I don't think we haven't had any news at all, have we, Sally, on that?
We haven't, no. I think Dr. Lodey's got a hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I did action that in terms of requesting that we have a new representative from our secondary head. I'll chase that up, Roger, on behalf of the SACRE.
Yeah, I noticed there's a new head at ISCO, John Bright, as well, who's actually got quite a strong interest in the area, if I remember rightly. So, but we'll obviously have a lot of other things to be doing at the moment as well. Okay, thanks for that, sir. Larry. Distribution of the SACRE annual report. Larry, how's that, sir? And Phil,
yeah, I can comment on that. So all of the avenues that we'd agreed for the annual report to be delivered to has been delivered to. So it's available on the council website, and it's been sent up to Welsh Government and the avenues. I think it's been sent out in the newsletters to schools as well. Ania, I sent it on to her in October, and then I think she sent it using the newsletters in schools to schools.
Yeah, because that was the important decision we made, that they would go out with the newsletter, and that actually happened now, did it?
Yes, it was sent out with the action plan as well. The action plan went out with the annual report. Okay.
I promised as well to give a presentation to the CATEAM, which is the Churches Together organisation in Llandudno, and that also took place and was well received. In fact, sparked quite a lot of interest. I think that people realised they should have been taking more interest than they had previously. So that went down well. Okay, this humanist representation and the timing of SACRE, you had an additional paper with regard to that. I included the correspondence between myself and Vanessa with regard to that, because it contained all the arguments for and against all the factors that needed to be taken into consideration. And in the end, I think we have to make a decision with regard to the two options that were in that paper, either to retain the current position retimings, or that we program one evening meeting per annum, so that people who find that difficult coming during the daytime could actually attend. I didn't want to lose that opportunity to have meetings in schools periodically, because I think that's been really valuable, and I know members have actually appreciated that. So over to you. Any thoughts people want to express? Any thoughts about that before we actually make a decision?
Chair, could I come in? My name's Dawn Hughes and I'm the Scrutiny and Committee Services Officer for Conwy. Can I just advise the committee, because obviously they may not be aware, that Conwy SACRA, it falls under the Local Government and Election Wales Act, and we have a requirement, unfortunately, to provide for hybrid meetings, which means that members of the committee can either attend in person or they can attend remotely. So with you mentioning that you want to hold meetings in school, this won't be available, unfortunately, because we have to have all our equipment is in the council chamber in Conwy, and it's a requirement, it's a statutory duty on the authority to provide hybrid meetings. We are currently testing them at the moment with a hope to go live in May, but as Conwy SACRA does fall within this, we will have to provide this solution. So, I mean, obviously it doesn't stop you visiting schools if that's what you want to do, but actually meetings of Conwy SACRA will have to be, provided remotely and in person.
And that's the only place where it can actually happen.
Absolutely, yeah. All the equipment is there. Yeah. So yes.
Presumably, Dawn, thank you for that advice, because that's really helpful. But presumably and hopefully there will be a point somewhere down the line where we have normality again.
We'd like to think so, but hybrid meeting solution will be here now to serve us going forward. So, officers can attend remotely, members of the committee can attend remotely or in person, depending on what what their circumstances are. But we will be off, it has to be offered to members. And as Conwy SACRA is a local authority committee, it does fall under our duty.
And it's certainly going to make it a lot easier for our professional members to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, that doesn't
No problem.
affect the decision on what we do here, but it's something that we need to obviously take on board in terms of the arguments that were made in the paper that you actually have. So, any thoughts on timings? Do we stay as we are?
Colette has a hand raised, Chair.
I know it has already been mentioned in the correspondence, but I think it is really important that as we're here as a body to discuss what goes on in our schools, that our teachers have a fair deal out of this. And I think in the pressures that's going on at the moment, as always, but possibly even more so now, I think it's vitally important that whatever we decide gives them the opportunity to access the SACRA meeting, and at a time that really doesn't put any added stress onto them. And just going back to your point about the school's input, at the end of the day, as we've done in the past at meetings, where we've had a group of children from the school come into Bodlonda to the meeting and give a presentation, then again, that could only be done during the day.
Right. So, particularly interested in Hayley's view then, as the one professional here.
Hi, Roger. I think an element of flexibility on my part, if the need was to have a meeting after hours, I'm okay with that. But, I am a parent as well. It would be a little bit more difficult for me to attend, but, with enough time and enough preparation, I'm more than happy to do that. But to echo what Colette said, I understand from the paperwork that you sent over that there was somebody mindful of missing teacher time with the children. I think it's just something we're going to have to deal with, unfortunately, and be flexible and consider that sometimes we can't be in the class and meet it. We've just got to find a balance, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm not pushing any particular line on this at all. I've had a request to take on board. Obviously, we lost one humanist representative because they couldn't attend, and this was a completely new feature in terms of membership, according to the the change in the acts and so forth. But I promised that I would open up, obviously, for discussion and that we would make a decision.
I believe that who wants to come in, Chair?
Any? On my internet, can you hear me?
Ga i ddod i mewn efo yma, Roger, os gwelwch yn dda. Dwi'n meddwl mae'r pwyntiau sydd wedi cael ei roi.
My connection just destabilized. Okay.
Chair, can I suggest if you turn your camera off, it tends to help.
Ga i ddod i mewn efo yma rwan, Roger, please?
Yes.
Mae'r pwyntiau sydd wedi cael ei rhoi yn rhai dilys iawn. Dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid i ni ddechrau gadw y dewis os da ni isio mynd ar ymweliad i ysgol, bod y dewis yna i ni. Ond dydy o ddim yn cael ei gyfri fel cyfarfod llawn swyddogol, felly casglu gwybodaeth fydda ni ac addysgu yn hunan mewn ymweliad o'r fath. Felly, dwi'n meddwl bod yr ymweliadau yma wedi bod yn bwysig yn y gorffennol i ni. O ran dod i bwyllgora, tyda ni ddim wedi bod yn llwyddiannus o gwbl i gael aelodau i bwyllgora y ddiweddar yma. Ond mae'n amlwg bod rhaid i ni i drio rhywbeth arall. Ac os ydy'r adnoddau ar gael trwy'r awdurdod gyda'r nos hefyd, mi fysa'n fantais mawr i ni drio cael cyfarfodydd yn ystod ar ôl oriau ysgol, a dweud y gwir yma yna. Gan rhoi fel da ni rhoi yn barod digon o gyfle i bobl baratoi cyn dod i'r cyfarfod, felly efo plant ac yn y blaen. Felly, swn i'n cefnogi yr amrywiaeth yna o ddewis sydd ganddo ni fel ffordd ymlaen.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. Any other thoughts on that? Phil, you have a lot of contact with teachers on a regular basis. Any sort of thoughts in terms of where they would come, particularly with regard to the issues that Hayley raised?
It is a difficult one because of, I think, childcare and working and all of the other pressures that are on teachers at the moment. But I suppose we could vary it, couldn't we? With one of an evening within a 3-meeting cycle within a school year, and then just evaluate at the end of that particular year how well that's gone. Was attendance up? Was it down? It can be very difficult actually after 1 year just to sort of evaluate on that one particular meeting. But maybe if we were to run it for a couple of years and then look back and sort of see how it's done, or even maybe a questionnaire, an online questionnaire to members we could do, just to find out whether there'd be more, because obviously there are people who are not here and they're not here for particular reasons, and actually they may have been able to attend if it was after school, or vice versa. So maybe we should do a questionnaire on the back of this particular meeting and then make a decision as a result of getting members further thoughts on that.
Yeah, I personally like that suggestion because we obviously have people who aren't here at the meeting, and their views were particularly valuable given the fact that they've not been able to come along on this occasion. So is that a proposal, Phil, that we have a questionnaire just out to our current membership and a view on this one, and then we'll make a decision at the next meeting?
We have a few hands raised, Chair. We have Colette Owen and Councillor Chris Cater. And also, I don't know if you've seen Dawn Hughes has put in the chat with our education scrutiny. We do alternate the meetings. So we have one at 2 o'clock and then the following one's at 5 o'clock, and it works quite well.
Right, okay, thanks for that, Dawn. Chris?
Yeah, I'm glad Dawn's put that in the chat, because I was going to mention that some of the scrutiny committees do alternate. Some are in the evening all the time at 5:30. just my experience of being a long-standing member of Ysgol Creighton's governing body, we have ours at 5:30 on a Monday. And actually that suits the teachers to some extent, and it suits myself, but some of the parent governors have difficulty attending that because it is peak time for family in the early evening then. So you're never going to please everyone, are you? And I think that what Phil suggested with a questionnaire and then perhaps starting with this alternating, and then we can easily see how popular it is. I'm sorry you've got a sort of lack of councillor membership, but hopefully after May, you might get a full cohort of councillors, and then you have to have the questionnaire for after May to see how that suits that part of your membership. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Grace. Yeah, well, and we could also put in the questionnaire alternative timings, couldn't we? Like 5 o'clock, but if you suggested, and 7 o'clock possibly, which takes on board, of course, people have got families and need to get home, etc. Colette.
I just really wanted to clarify the timing. So I take it it's around about 5 would be the evening one, because I know there is a question about Bodlondeb, etc. whenever we do get back there.
Yeah. Are we fine on that?
Yeah, but on debits, yeah, no, I mean, we have late meetings. We have meetings that start at 6. We have, there's not an issue with Bodlondeb being opened or whatever. I mean, we have meetings going on past 8 o'clock, for our evening meetings. So that's not an issue whatsoever,
Right, okay. Right, well, I'm going to propose we have a questionnaire that takes on board the timings. It'll either, the choices will be 1 a year or alternatively, as some of the council scrutiny committees actually do as well. So, and we'll get that out to you before the next meeting. I'm going to propose that. Do I have a seconder? No. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Faith. Council. Yeah. And teacher. Unanimous. Okay, great. Okay, thanks for that. Right. So we're on to item 9. This is over to you, Phil. Reminder that, in fact, we had a request out to GWER for representation for Conwy Sacre on the groups that they have been forming in the initiation of the curriculum. So could you just give some feedback on that?
Yes, so all the local network groups across North Wales have got membership on them that will be feeding into the work of Sacre. So we've not got a Sacre member that's on the network, but remember we were talking about a network of teachers initially. The teachers that had shown an interest in that network, I asked them if they would be able to attend the network group initiated by GWER for the local for humanities, and that's been taken up. So we've got representation of people that I'm in contact with, and that will be able to support sort of RVE and possibly even come to these meetings to be able to provide a bit of an update. Just to give you a bit of an update on or background to those groups. GWER have initiated what they call the local network groups in each of the local authorities for all of the AOLE, so for science and technology, for maths, for languages, for humanities, for expressive arts. Each one of those, as well as curriculum design and assessment, have got their own local group of teachers of schools in Conwy to be able to discuss those particular areas, curriculum design, what humanities might look like if you were planning schemes or lessons or a series of activities. They've gone really, really, really well. The philosophy behind them from a GWARE point of view is facilitation. It's not to provide a huge amount of steer, it's to allow schools to explore the statements of what matters, to explore the documentation, and then to be able to realise that within their own schools. And that's the philosophy that underpins the Curriculum for Wales, that it's a school curriculum, it's a bottom-up curriculum rather than the top-down curriculum. And I've got to say that I've been so impressed with the way that all of the local networks and Conwy, especially Conwy actually, the way that they've been able to unpack the humanities documentation and the way that they've been able to put together sort of lesson ideas or what that might look like in their own schools. There is the added, none of the other AOLEs have the guidance in the same way that humanities or RVE within humanities has. And there is an extra layer that whatever that is adopted as an agreed syllabus, that agreed syllabus will be quite an important component in the delivery and the design of the humanities. So having a good awareness of that is important. The first hurdle we've got to get through is the agreed syllabus conference, which is on the agenda, and an understanding of what the guidance looks like at the moment. It's only really just been released. I think it was released about 6 weeks ago, and we're going to have a presentation unpicking what that guidance might look like, and obviously that's going to have a big impact.
We'll pick up on that now, Phil, because that's where we're going to the next time with the presentation from yourself. For those of you who are interested in looking at perhaps in a bit more detail in that relationship between GWARE and the implementation of the curriculum by the teachers, Phil actually did a presentation at WASACA on that, and it's actually in the minutes. There's about half a page in the minutes on that, if you should take a look at that after the meeting. Okay, Phil, we've got the guidance, and it's the first time we've had a chance to look at this. So could you take us through it?
I can. Sally, would I be able to share my screen, please? I've created a little presentation that it's just taking the language of the guidance, but it's just put it in a sort of hopefully a relatively coherent way.
Yeah, absolutely. You can share your screen, no problem.
Oh, thank you. PowerPoint. Hopefully you can see Curriculum for Wales, Religion, Values and Ethics Guidance. Can somebody just confirm that they can see that, please? Oh, thanks, Hayley. Thank you, Alan. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just take you through my understanding of the guidance and also the legislation part of it. I'm hoping that we will be able to take the recording from this particular meeting and distribute it around schools so that they will be able to get a good understanding of the guidance as well. We'll be inviting as many schools as would like to attend the agreed syllabus conference, and I think an understanding of the guidance without me going through the guidance as part of the agreed syllabus conference is really, really, really important. So this video will hopefully serve as an information to provide the information for those teachers and anybody else that would like to attend the agreed syllabus conference, so that we don't have to go through the guidance again in too much detail. You have got a copy of the guidance, the text in the agenda. I think it says pages 16 to 28. It does, this bit follows the legislative part first, and then it picks up the guidance. So from 16, it'll be about halfway through this particular presentation, but I would just want to set the scene in terms of legislation. The curriculum and the RVE guidance sits within a much, much bigger piece of work. And the Curriculum for Wales consists of a whole plethora of new type of wording that teachers and people will not have heard of before until they've embarked on trying to understand the Curriculum for Wales and this particular process. So what I've done here is just outline some of those statements and the words and the phrases that are required to have a better understanding of the guidance and the Curriculum for Wales. It's a school, hopefully a school-led process. The schools are responsible for designing their own curricula. But the parameters in which they would work, this is the language that supports that. So we've got these things called statements of what matters. They are big ideas and the key principles in each of the area of learning and experience. And there's 6 of these areas of learning experience. I'll show you that on another slide. There are these things called principles of progression. So it's we used to have level descriptors, and if people could do something, they were given a particular number, a bit of an arbitrary number. But now there's this understanding that progression is more than that. It's about a greater understanding of the depth of the subject. It's being able to apply the skills that they've learnt across a range of knowledge. Principles of progression is much more than just saying, oh, can they explain? All right, they now need to analyze. Can they analyze? Now they need to evaluate. Actually, it's going a little bit deeper than that. There are descriptions of learning about it's sort of what the progress looks like at each particular stage within a pupil's career through school. And then there are these designing your curriculum principles for each of the areas. And in the designing your curriculum, specifically within humanities, there are elements of geography that need to be identified. There are elements of history that need to be identified. And there is obviously elements of RVE and social sciences that will be different, but they need to be distinct in the humanities area of learning. And so in the designing your curriculum section, there is an outline of those specifics. The supporting guidance, looking at assessment, that's still being discussed at the moment. And I know Gwer's worked quite hard on trying to look at what assessment's going to look like, because it's not just a case of saying this pupil's a level 4 or this pupil's a level 5. It's looking at the progression about what pupils can or can't do in humanities and trying to find a way of presenting that coherently, but without sort of arbitrarily just sort of putting numbers without any particular meaning. So there's a big conversation that schools are undertaking at the moment around what progression might look like within the various areas of learning experience, including humanities. There are the 4 purposes. Sorry, Hayley, you'll have had this coming out of your ears, I'm sure, by now, over the sort of 5 years. But these are the principles that underpin all of our curriculum. So the pupils should be enterprising, creative contributors, healthy, confident individuals, ethically informed citizens, ambitious, capable learners. These are the things that underpin the curriculum for Wales. We've got the 6 areas of learning experience that I mentioned earlier. So that's how the knowledge and the skills has been chunked within the curriculum. But that's not to say that within humanities, there isn't a voice of geography, or there isn't the flavour of history, or there isn't the independent sort of skills and knowledge that come with RVE. It's not that those lose their identity in the new curriculum. It's just that they're helped to be supported within that particular area. And there is an encouraging of schools to go cross-curricular where they can, and intercurricular. So if you can study one topic and out of that bring out some RVE and bring out the geography and bring out the history, and actually maybe even look at expressive arts within that particular sort of topic or within that theme, then that will help pupils to transfer their skills across a wide range of knowledge, and that will be better for their learning in the long run. So those subjects have been sort of grouped together within humanities, but they've by no means lost their identity. The statements of what matters for humanities are on the screen. So we've got inquiry, exploration, investigation, inspire curiosity about the world, its past, present, and future. These are just phrases that have tried to encapsulate the big ideas and the major aspects within humanities. So inquiry is the first one. Human experiences are complex and they're interpreted in different ways and represented and perceived in different ways. Number 2, our natural world. We have the actions that humans have got a big impact on our natural world. And that's sort of summed up in number 3. Number 4 talks about societies being complex and diverse. And then the 5th one, self-aware citizens engaging the challenges and the opportunities that we all face. Now, I'm sure you can see that if you've sort of been in the RE world for a long time, there are elements that are more obvious in those than others. So number 2, number 4, there's definitely very specific RE elements that would be in there, or RV elements in the new curriculum. But that's not to say that we can't get RVE elements in all of those 5 statements of what matters. And that's up to the school then to be able to find those opportunities and seek those opportunities within the 5 statements of what matters. Each of the AOLEs have got their own statements of what matters. So there's 3 in expressive arts, 5 in health and well-being, 5 in humanities, etc., etc. I think that's 27 statements of what matters in all across the curriculum. That makes up the knowledge, skills and the experiences across the curriculum. They're chunked into those 6, but actually those are then can be broken down into the statements of what matters. And interestingly, if you do have a look at the Curriculum for Wales website and looking at the statements of what matters, diversity, natural world, there are things that cross-cut all of the, or not all of them, but they can be seen in different statements of what matters. So by dipping into one in humanities, with a good understanding of the statements of what matters, you can say, well, actually, that will apply to the science element as well, or that might apply in the health and well-being. So there's a real connection between the statements of what matters, or there can be, as the teachers get a better understanding of what they look like. These are some of the other terms that are connected with the curriculum. Integral skills. These are across the curricula. So all of the areas of learning and experience should be able to provide opportunities for pupils to be creative and innovative, to provide opportunities for critical thinking and problem solving, for personal effectiveness and planning and organisation. Each one of those has got its own paragraph within the Curriculum for Wales, again, if you wanted to go and have a look. And they're also exemplified within the AOLEs, how humanities can have an impact on those. Cross-curricular skills, they've been around quite a while now, but literacy, numeracy and digital competence, they are areas that can be developed across the AOLEs, including humanities. And then there's these things called the cross-cutting themes: relationships and sexuality education, human rights education, diversity, careers and work-related experiences, local, national, international context. Again, these are areas that should be developed across the curriculum, not just in one subject or one AOLE. These are areas for the whole of the curriculum. The legislative part, if you type in Curriculum for Wales into Google, you'll come up with the Curriculum for Wales homepage. And there is a legislation summary, and on the left-hand side, there's some headings here, and there's a religion, values and ethics section that just outlines the changes to the law specifically for RVE. So I'll very quickly go through those changes. There is a change in the name, so religious values and ethics. It was religious education, but now that's changed, and that's to try and encourage the investigation of sort of philosophical convictions, as well as as well as religious traditions within that particular subject. So it's broadening the scope and broadening the what pupils will be able to look at. And then that meets Protocol 1 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And so the ATP1 appears right throughout the documentation here, just to say that philosophical convictions meets the requirement of the European Convention. Within the philosophical convictions, the document there has exemplified humanism, atheism and secularism as sort of some of the beliefs that term may include, but it's broader than that. There says there's not an exhaustive list, but in the documentation, if you were to go to that link, it does outline some of the philosophical convictions identified by case law, European case law, that would come under that particular heading. And so
can I just chip in there?
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, because they obviously didn't take on board what one of the dangers that we outlined in our return, which was that if you're talking about philosophical convictions, you've got things like fascism, liberalism, socialism, communism, And we know all the fuss that's going on in England about teaching political ideas in school at the moment. But it completely ignores all of that area in this outline.
There is one phrase, and I've just highlighted it in the bottom of this next section here. And whilst it says that religious and non-religious convictions are diverse and complex phenomena, it does sort of, and it says in the previous slide that these are examples of philosophical convictions, so atheism, humanism, and atheism. But then at the bottom of here, I've emboldened it. It says the dimension of religious and non-religious convictions within the intellectual education should therefore reflect such diversity and complexity at the local, regional and international level. Now, I think you start local there. So whatever the philosophical convictions of the residents of Conwy, I think that's the place to start. And in the same way that we would have created representation on SACRE based on adherence to a particular sort of denomination or particular faith, actually we could do something similar with the philosophical convictions. So it states there at the bottom that they should reflect the diversity and the complexity at the local, it does say regional, international level, and obviously the broader the net, the wider the number of philosophical convictions. But actually, if you reduce that net and if we start and look in our locality, I think that's the best place for schools to start to be able to identify those philosophical convictions. So taking on board what you said there, Roger, but I think if a school starts with itself and then moves out in concentric circles, a mile, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, it will come across the philosophical convictions that might be appropriate for the learning within their curriculum.
Where it, other than the census, where's the data coming from?
I think that would be down to groups that meet. I agree that the trying to get that data is going to be very, very, very difficult. But I suppose that's where schools can start, really, by asking the parents of their children that are in their school, asking their own communities, going to their community councils and saying, do you know of particular, that obviously have to define what philosophical convictions might mean, but actually that might create a nice conversation between a community council and the school as they go and seek what is the beliefs and the values and the traditions of the people that live around my school, in my locality, in my town, in my local authority. So I think it's something that schools can work on, but I think it's quite an engaging way of getting the pupils to look at the nature of belief within their own school, but then within their town, within their local authority. There is a section then on the agreed syllabus and the status it would have within different types of schools. So they're categorized as community schools, foundation and voluntary schools without a religious character. So those are schools that traditionally, as a local authority, SACRE, we would be creating, or we would be advising the local authority to adopt an agreed syllabus that would be relevant for these schools. There is a change in the language as to how schools would, the relationship between the agreed syllabus and those schools, and it's been, the language is having regards to the agreed syllabus. So they must have regard to, they don't have to follow it in as sort of a strict way as they used to. They must have regards to it. And interestingly, they have regard to that guidance as well. The foundation and voluntary controlled schools, so a voluntary controlled school, they would generally speaking follow an agreed syllabus. There is a change for them that if a parent asks them or asks for their child to receive denominational RE, because the church, the voluntary controlled school might be a Church in Wales voluntary controlled school, there is a responsibility on the school now to provide maybe Church in Wales RE or RVE for those. And for the voluntary aided schools that have a religious character, they would generally be following, possibly, again, for a Church in Wales school or for a Catholic school, they'll be following a church syllabus. If a parent wants them or wants their child to follow an agreed syllabus-based syllabus, that school must provide that for those cases. Having spoke to the Church in Wales,
Could I just ask a few questions? Would lose some of this stuff because this is where the kind of there's been a great move really to I think to actually restrict the influence to some extent of religious foundation schools, and I wondered whether and Colette would be better placed perhaps in this, particularly with voluntary control schools, that maybe there might be a move now to put into their foundation statements particular desires for a particular kind of Rve. And if it isn't there, it doesn't happen. But if it goes in there, my reading of this is it has to be taken note of.
Yeah,
that's also true, obviously, of aided schools. And the other question to you is, with your up-broad experiences, this word having regard, we're going to do all this work, actually, in an agreed syllabus conference, but now they only have to have regard. And I just wonder, in terms of interpretation by Estin or whoever comes in and does it, how they're going to view having regard.
This is why the adoption of the agreed syllabus is going to be so important, because the guidance, as we're looking at it now, has been written with the Curriculum for Wales in mind. They work hand in hand. They're a jigsaw piece and they're working together. The further away you get from the guidance and the more prescriptive you are as an agreed syllabus, going back maybe 20 years looking at an agreed syllabus where it said you have to teach a certain religion in a certain year group, that doesn't really fit the philosophy of the new curriculum. And so if an agreed syllabus was to do that, which I'm sure we won't, but if we were, then schools might say, well, actually that's not applicable to us, because one, we've got nobody of that particular faith around us. We've got people of a different faith around us, and we want to explore what that might look like. And actually, we want pupils to draw from their own experiences, and that's not reflected in the agreed syllabus. So therefore, having regards to the agreed syllabus provides me as a school with the flexibility to ensure that I'm providing critical, objective, pluralistic RE, but within the confines of my locality. And in a way that works really well. But I think if we were to adopt the guidance as our agreed syllabus, and I'll come on to that in a moment, then actually the having regard to becomes well, actually, we will follow that because it's written for the Curriculum for Wales. The whole thing is seamless, rather than having an agreed syllabus that is slightly awkward and sits slightly outside of the Curriculum for Wales. So therefore, I need to have regard to ensure that it meets the Curriculum for Wales. Actually, if the agreed syllabus is part of what is designed as within the Curriculum for Wales, I don't think we have a problem with that. The issue, and Colette may want to come in here, is that, sorry, Colette, I was going to ring you this morning. I didn't get around to it, unfortunately. But I know that the Church in Wales is creating a syllabus that will work alongside the agreed syllabus. It works alongside the guidance, if you like. So schools won't have to do anything different to be able to provide pluralistic, critical, objective RVE. And so therefore, parents won't really be able to request something different, because actually what is different is applicable for the legislation. Is that the same as in Catholic schools, Colette? Do you know?
Yeah, that's right. And we're actually in the process of having a new religious education curriculum directory for Catholic schools in England and Wales. And so therefore, because that's more or less finished, they have made sure all along that it will fit with. And so we're hoping, I think the big question is whether the SACRAs around Wales are actually going to formulate their agreed syllabus from the guidance. And that's where they're at to at the moment. But if for any reason there is any difference, then there will be supplementary guidance for Catholic schools to make sure it has regard to the agreed syllabus, so that our teachers don't have to have two curriculums going should a parent request that.
Yeah, that was the big worrying thing about that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All that additional work if possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Roger, can I come in here? The having regard one, I think those of us who have been in education for a long time are used to the word having regard, because you have to have a certain connection with the agreed syllabus. But if you want to go in your own direction, you have to prove that your own direction has regard to that curriculum. And even if Estin comes in and showing that you are doing very well with a different structure, they will always commend that risk that schools have taken and brought things forward. So having regard can be quite useful in the flexibility of schools, because before we were stuck with the national curriculum. And many people thought at that time, or didn't have the confidence to move in a more creative way with it. So in a way, having regard creates, not many problems for some who have been in education for a long time.
That brings up
and that flexibility was all that Phil was talking about, particularly in relationship to, educating the child, starting from where they are, where they grew up in the beginning, and as they grow older, as we all know, their vision widens out, and so that's very helpful. Yeah, so I'll take your points as well, Hugh.
I think Hugh summed it up there quite nicely in terms of it brings creativity into the hands of the teachers, which I think is welcome. So the legislative changes regarding the Act for agreed syllabus conferences and for advisory councils, the Act makes it explicit that any agreed syllabus for RV must reflect both religious beliefs and also non-religious, which are philosophical convictions. And the appointment of persons representing non-religious philosophical convictions is done in the same way that those who hold religious beliefs would be appointed to both an agreed SACRE or a SAC and an agreed syllabus conferences. So they are legislative changes. They were assumed previously, but now it's written specifically like that. And then this is quite nice, actually, that the agreed syllabus is not designed to be a scheme of work, but it's a legal reference point for schools to support them in the designing of their own curriculum, which includes RVE in the humanities area. It states here, I've underlined it and in bold, it says the statutory Rve Guidance was written as the basis for the agreed syllabus. Should a local authority, going back to Colette's point, but should a local authority wish to adopt or adapt this guidance as their agreed syllabus, they may do so. And again, 2008, with the exemplar framework, it was adopted by 22 local authorities. The consistency across Wales was then the envy of RE teachers in England. It was, I remember it well. But it says here, it will ultimately be the responsibility of the provider, the school, to ensure that non-denominational RVE is provided pluralistically. So actually the guidance, the agreed syllabus will be adopted by a local authority, but ultimately it's the provider that will enact on that to ensure that their denominational RVEs provided pluralistically. The legal requirements for the agreed syllabus conference. So every local authority is required to establish an agreed syllabus conference, which
before you get that far, Phil.
Yeah.
With regard to what is it now? Yeah, we have to take, obviously, the composition of the SACRE has to take on board proportionately the strength of each religion, denomination, or conviction in its local area. But coming back to the question we asked before, which is how do you ascertain that?
Yeah.
Which is quite difficult. And looking back at some of the definitions that occurred in the European
Have we lost you?
Law when that was actually laid out. Ignore it or what?
I missed the last bit of that, but to answer the first part of that, the guidance is quite comprehensive. We're not starting from scratch in the writing of an agreed syllabus. I think the composition of an agreed syllabus conference is really important if you're writing an agreed syllabus. So if you're writing an agreed syllabus that needs to reflect the various beliefs of people within Conwy.
Sorry, I mustn't have been very clear on that. I was talking about the composition of SACRE.
Okay.
The syllabus conference, which is pretty clear in what's laid out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, historically it was done on census data, but I'm not sure. We looked at the Constitution a while ago, and it had a breakdown of the denominations within Conwy, but I'm not sure how they got that. I know Tanya's on this call. Are you able, Tanya, to sort of, how would SACRAs gain the data to be able to look at denominational representation on SACRAs?
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
You hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
I'd have to, we would have to follow that up, Phil.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Can I come in here again? What we've done traditionally here is seeing members as representatives of groups. So there is a danger that we're overthinking this matter at the moment. And we might see that there's one fascist living in Llandudno that we might want him on SACRA. We must be very, very careful here. After all, we could have a big group of each individual having different views and so on. But in the end, you know, we have responsibility at the moment reporting back to our faith groups and so on. But where individuals are concerned, I don't know where we would stand.
I think
so,
that's, sorry.
Yeah,
I think that's why the Humanist Association is a good organisation to provide representation for SACRA, is because they belong to a wider group. Like you say, actually there are a variety of views, and you don't want one person coming on to SACRA to represent themselves. You want them to represent the group that they are representing. So actually, if they're part of a bigger body and they report back to that body, and then they're able to say, well, SACRA is discussing this, or is there anything that I need to feed into SACRA as a result of who you are and the organisations you sit on? I think that brings the accountability. So maybe that's what we look for, is the associations and the organisations that the philosophical convictions would sit under and be part of, but going forward. But I think that's not for an agreed syllabus conference, but that is a conversation for SACs maybe moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was wondering as well, Phil, just what about non-denominational groups like Youth for Christ and so forth? Where do they fit into all of this?
I suppose they're called para-church organisations, aren't they? So they would work across a number of denominations. I suppose it depends on what the purpose of that organisation is for. And how different their beliefs and their traditions might be to other denominations and traditions. So I don't know. I'd shy away, I think, from parachurch organisations because they wouldn't necessarily have a code of belief of themselves, but they maybe adopt a particular tradition, maybe evangelical or a free church.
Well, that would be composed of youngsters.
Yes,
who are going to a whole wide range of churches where maybe there isn't a strong youth culture in the church. So yes,
yeah. I think this is for a conversation for another time, possibly.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
Colette has a hand raised. Oh, she's lowered it. Ignore me.
Okay. So the Agreed Syllabus Conference must reflect that the religious traditions in Wales are in the main Christian, while taking into account the teaching and practices of other principal religions represented in Wales. That's really important. That's not changed. That's the same as it was previously. And that a range of non-religious philosophical convictions are held in Wales. So the Agreed Syllabus Conference must ensure that that is reflected in an agreed syllabus. The syllabus again must have regards to any guidance given by the Welsh ministers. That is the guidance that we're talking about at the moment. That any subcommittees appointed shall include at least one member of each of the committees, so that when we convene, or when the local authority will convene an agreed syllabus conference, that there is a counsellor there, that there is a faith representative or faith and belief representative, and that there is a teacher. We are going to encourage as many teachers to attend that as we can. And then Each of those committees will have a vote, and we must have unanimous agreements that that we would advise the local authority to adopt a particular agreed syllabus. There are a number of questions. I'm not going to go through these in any detail, but hopefully if this is being videoed, people will be able to look through these at their own leisure, and they are in the guidance in the agenda. So these are a number of questions that SACRE can ask itself. So these are exhaustive SACRE and SACREs and agreed syllabus conferences, sorry. These are the ones that we will ask ourselves as a SACRE possibly in the future. And then these are the questions. So there's 9 questions in that list. 7 of them are SACRE orientated, and then 2 of them would be for the syllabus, the agreed syllabus. So how can collaboration between the agreed syllabus conference and the local authority schools and settings be facilitated to ensure appropriate agreed syllabus is produced for your area? If we adopt the guidance as an agreed syllabus, I don't think that question needs to be sort of looked at in too much detail, because the guidance will have taken that into sort of already. Are there any other groups or organisations as well that could support the agreed syllabus conference in developing a local agreed syllabus for your area? Again, if the guidance is adopted, again, a question that's probably not as relevant. The right to withdrawal is being removed. So from September this year, the right of withdrawal has been removed for our nursery right through to year 6. If a school adopts the curriculum for Wales in year 7, then the right of withdrawal will be removed for them in 2022. But if a high school postpones the implementation of the curriculum for Wales for a year, year 7 and 8 will be doing the curriculum for Wales in 23, and then the right of withdrawal will apply for those particular pupils, and then it will work its way through as the curriculum enters into year 9, 10 and 11 in years 2024, 25 and 26. So there's yeah, it's not for all pupils initially. It will be now this will have an impact on the agreed syllabus as well, I think, because the agreed syllabus will be applicable for year 7 pupils now, 2022, and then 23 for year 8, then 24 for year 9, then 25 for year 10. So pupils in current year 9 will still be using the current agreed syllabus. And I think that needs to be reflected in the agreed syllabus documentation. On the Curriculum for Wales website, if you click on the humanities section, there are 5 sections within that. Introduction, statements of what matters, principles of progression, the things that I've described already. But in section 5, it talks about the designing your curriculum, and at the bottom there you can find the guidance. So if you click on the guidance, that's where it sits within the Curriculum for Wales website. The purpose of the RVE guidance is just to ensure that the curriculum can be taken by practitioners and developed within their particular curriculum. It outlines the distinct contribution, it says here, that RVE makes to the curriculum for Wales. We've already talked about the legal status and where that would come on in. The audience, those that must have regards to this, are head teachers of a maintained school, the governing body as well of a maintained school, a local authority in Wales, and then it talks about non-maintained nursery and PRUs. It also talks about sort of people like ESTIN, regional consortia, awarding bodies, that they don't have to have regard to the guidance, but it will definitely help them in an awareness of the work that they do. This bit is for Roger. We've been talking about the spiritual development within the curriculum. Interestingly, spiritual development is highlighted as one of the areas of the 4 purposes, but the only place that it is exemplified anywhere in the Curriculum for Wales documentation is in the RVE guidance. I don't think there is anywhere else that talks about spiritual development in the detail that it goes to in the RVE guidance, which is really important, really, because I don't think it's a responsibility of RVE teachers in, let's say, a high school to develop spirituality right across the curriculum for all of the sort of teachers and all of the pupils. So I think the spiritual development is something that needs to be promoted, especially for those that are not going to be teaching RVE in a high school, because spirituality is still an important part of the curriculum. The SMSC clause in law hasn't changed, spiritual, moral, social and cultural. That's still a relevant element of an education or a requirement for a pupil. And so because this is the only place that is exemplified, I think there may be some work from a local authority or from GWER or for whoever to be able to provide an awareness for all teachers on this particular aspect of the guidance.
Well, can I pick you up there?
Yeah.
Phil? And I would include, we would include reflection in that as well.
Yes, yeah.
You have all, and the necessity of supporting teachers so that they are able to access this when it's, you know, it's not immediately apparent, but you have done an enormous amount of work already on helping, on providing support and analysis for teachers in actually designing the curriculum in a way which they are aware of these particular factors. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I can do. This is, so if we adopt the agreed syllabus, I think the next job then is supporting schools and training and helping get that an awareness of what the guidance is out to schools. But I was talking with Roger a couple of days ago. We were looking at the idea of what spirituality is within a school. It's to do with our relationships with other people. So BAME understanding of racism and diversity comes into that in my interactions with others. My understanding of myself, looking at mindfulness, looking at how I think and my own sort of anxieties, etc. Looking down towards my relationship with the earth and the relationship with the environment. And then we were talking about the idea of looking up. What did that look like? And Roger came up with the inspired word of beyond, actually looking at those big questions. What is it to be human? You know, the idea of maybe a possible power and ultimate reality. I think there's a really nice way of framing spirituality in those four areas. They are expressed in the documentation that you've got in the agenda, and they can be pigeonholed into up, down, left. I said up, down, in and out. It was like the hokey cokey spirituality, but that beyond for looking up is a really nice way of phrasing it. But I think there's some work there to be done in looking at what spirituality and how that can be developed. That's not to say that teachers don't develop it already. You know, the spirituality is an aspect of the curriculum that's currently there and currently available, and that will continue. I'm hoping that because it's only in the RVE guidance that schools don't take their finger off the pulse and say, well, actually, it's only in RVE, so therefore we're not going to do it anywhere else. There is sort of an expectation with the four purposes that spirituality should be done throughout the curriculum. It's just making teachers aware that at the moment it sits within this guidance. Is that all right, Roger?
Yeah, you provide, I've got it here on the side of my screen here actually, but you provided enormous, about 5 or 6 pages on this in terms of looking at the curriculum. I presume
Yes.
that is going to be the basis of support we might offer as a result of the ASC.
Yeah, there is a couple of pages that I'm hoping Hayley will like a little bit further on in this presentation, because it's taking, and Tanya will be aware of this because I've had a conversation with Tanya about the lenses and how they are presented to our teachers. Because in the documentation that we've got at the moment, it's just a huge body of text. But actually in the way that it's presented can help sort of teachers digest that. I'll come on to that in a moment.
Okay.
So designing
can I come in here, Roger, to ask Phil a question? You know, as a lay person now, we you know, and this will be shared amongst a lot of people. There is a danger that we're forgetting RE in school as well as RVE, because RE is a legislation on its own. And there must be a connection somewhere between the RE and RVE. So when discussing for lay people, in discussing this does not stand on its own as a whole curriculum, because there needs to be a reminder somewhere that there is also RE as a legislation on its own as well, or people will go over the top with this. And spirituality also comes into the RE aspect of things. But spirituality for me was getting people through some of those things that you were asking, reminding people of, the question that cannot be answered really by science, by geography, by all these things, and which people reflect on. You're bringing people to a higher level of questioning there, you know, who made the world and so on. And people, you don't have to give them answers, they have to think spiritually for themselves. And that is what happens when you pray, isn't it? You present yourself at a higher level there in prayer, or in a minute's silence in a meeting as well, because quiet reflection, it also covers spirituality as well. But I am worried about forgetting the RE element when you're discussing all these things as well.
I'm saving the best till last, Hugh. So
okay.
in terms of the content, in terms of being able to unpick what you would like to learn and what you're going to put in your curriculum, as in the knowledge and the skills, that will hopefully be, and I've only got a few slides to go, but I'm hoping I've saved the best till last, and you'll be able to see where the content comes into all of this. At the moment, we've been setting the scene, haven't we? We've been looking at the legislation, we've been looking at the curriculum as a whole, and then where RVE sits into it. The spirituality is the first aspect of the guidance. It's the bit that's expressed initially, but then hopefully when you see this, it'll hopefully make sense. So I've already said that designing a curriculum needs to take into cross-cutting themes, cross-curricular skills, and the integral skills, and the statements of what matters, and the RV concepts of the lenses. It's quite big, isn't it? There's a lot to take in when it comes to designing a curriculum, but actually it's to be expected. We are talking about a curriculum. It's not a small thing, is it? It's quite a large, and these, the final two, are the bits that we're going to focus on now. So the concepts, there are a number of concepts that are expressed in each of the statements of what matters. So on the top, I'll just explain what this means. This is my interpretation, but it's all taken directly from the guidance. So at the top, you've got the statements of what matters. The first one is to do with inquiry. The second one is to do with perception. The third one is to do with the natural world. The fourth one is to do with communities, and the fifth one is to do with problem solving, etc. So in the first one, we've got questioning, evidence, evaluation, ethics, and judgments. Those are concepts that are included in the statement of what matters, and they're very explicit. They're in the final paragraph, and it says that this statement of what matters will explore. It says it on the left-hand side here. It says encourage the exploration of the concepts, including, so not exhaustive, but including questioning, evidence, evaluation, ethics, and judgments. Underneath there is another box with a range of other concepts. Now, in the document that you've got, there is a one page, I'll see if I can find it, with, no, it's just got the legislation. See if I can find it. It's got, no, it's not there, sorry. It's got the concepts outlined as a heading, and then it's got just literally, it must have, well, it's got all of these concepts written out in sentences. What I did was I went through the statements of what matters and the progression steps, the descriptions of learning, and I looked for each of these words within a particular statement of what matters. So underneath the first one, it's got curious, meaning, human sources, condition, ethics, inquiry, humanity, and worldviews. Those are concepts that are explicitly linked with that first statement of what matters. Now, talking with Libby, they are not solely for statements of what matters 1. So you can do ethics all over the place. You can do worldviews all over the place. But in terms of the documentation, that's what it says sort of explicitly. So the second one's got ultimate, sources, questions, self, identity, sense of self, meaning. Now, going back to Hugh's point there, looking at the idea of sources, you've got religious leaders, you've got books, you've got authority, you've got the science, you've got all sorts that comes out of that. Identity, what is it to be religious? What is it to be non-religious? Ultimate questions, you've got, is there where did the world come from? Will we live on forever after we die? What happens after we die? So you can start to see that those RVE type style questions are coming into these particular concepts. At the bottom box, is almost like a catch-all. There's a load of other concepts that are included in the guidance that are not explicitly referenced in the statements of what matters, but they are there. So things like origin, nature of life, extremism, ritual, celebration, life stance, all of these are specific concepts that are included in the guidance. This is not a tick box exercise. A school is not expected to go, all right, extremism, right, I need to have done that at some point in the school's career, a child's career in my school. These are the way of enabling a teacher to put their curriculum together, drawing on the concepts as they see fit, as it starts to work on their in their curriculum. I think, and Tanya might want to sort of say something else, I'm not sure, but I would expect that the 5 statements of what matters, they give me my breadth of my curriculum. I would expect that they would be done over what we would have traditionally highlighted as a key stage, possibly. So you'd want pupils to look at diversity, you'd want pupils to look at maybe the relationship with the earth, but you'd want them to look at that within a shorter period of time, not just necessarily once in their school career. There are these things called RVE lenses. So going back to Hugh's question about where's the RE within this, these lenses are search for meaning and purpose, the natural world of living things, identity and belonging, authority and influence, relationships and responsibility. I'm hoping you can start to see there meaning and purpose, big questions, natural world and living things, who made the world? Was the world made? Did it just come about by itself? Identity and belonging, what is it to belong to a community? What is it to identify as an atheist or identify as a Christian? Authority and influence, looking at maybe books and people and senses of where do I get my, what tells me how to live? Relationships and responsibility, looking at marriages, looking at communities. So hopefully within these, you've got those headings that you can draw out more traditional ways of teaching RE, but obviously other ways of expressing the subject like we've not been able to in the past. Now, we've got the author of these in the room today. Tanya has written the lenses, so I'm hoping I don't say anything out of turn, Tanya. What I did was, in the curriculum guidance, it's very wordy. So it's just a block of text. There is this heading, search for meaning and purpose. And then it says, and they're called it's about, or that's how I phrase them. So search for meaning and purpose is about deeper questions of life. It's about influence and continuity. It's about human questions and contributions. And so in the documentation, this is what it looks like. So it says example learning journey, search for meaning and purpose. This learning journey draws mainly on 2 statements of what matters, events and human experiences, blah, 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 blah. And then it says, this journey is about the deeper questions of life. And there's this rubric in every one of them, which I really like, Tanya. It says at the early stages, and then it talks about what pupils can do. It says further along their journey, and it talks about what pupils can do. And then it says later on, this is what pupils can do. So what I've done is I've put it in a little table where I've taken search for meaning and purpose. These are the statements of what matters that they relate to, but they're not exhaustive. They can reflect others if you would like to do that. This is what it's about, taking that it's about statement. And then I've put at the early stages, learners begin to further along, pupils can do this, and later pupils can do this. Now, for those that have understood the progression steps, this is probably early years. This is probably year 6, year 7, and then this is year 11. So this shows you me progression within that particular areas of questions of life or the influence of continuity change. Now, I've done one of those. Now, I'm not doing anything that the guidance hasn't already provided. This is just the guidance in a way that my little brain can interpret and can understand. Now, we may want to have a conversation about how we present the guidance when we have the agreed syllabus conference, and we may want to present it like this, or we may just want to present it as a bunch of text and then teachers can sort of create their own, or we can do both. We could present it just as a bunch of text and then we can produce our own supplementary support materials that might reflect something like this a little bit later. But that's for a later conversation to do with the agreed syllabus conference.
Okay. Well,
can I thank you? Can I thank you for that, Phil? That answers my questions really. And I welcome it because, you know, for many years I was working with the idea of Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know if you've discussed that at all, and this follows a general rule. The only thing that we must be very careful in the further along and later stages, that some children develop at a different stage. Differently, and some might ask that the later questions and evaluation and so on much earlier than others there. So I'm sure teachers will be aware of that.
Not only that as well, Hugh, because on the deeper and bigger questions here to do with meaning and so forth, there's a certain abstraction of mind required for some of those particular concepts.
Yeah.
And we all, adults as well, have different modes of learning and thinking. And, you know, I'm an abstract thinker. My head of art was an abstract thinker. Most of my staff would have been concrete thinkers. There's a whole, if you do it, there's a circle, there's 4 quarters, and we're all a little bit in everything. But people have dominance. And that's therefore not to do with the linear age progression. It's to do with how your particular mind works as well. I'm not sure how going away and thinking about that in relationship to this material, but I'm interested in, Hayley, you still there?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, can I just, this is very interesting conversation. Can I just briefly come in there? Yeah. I have got myself unmuted. I think that the 2 things, what you've just said actually fits in with how the curriculum for Wales actually understands progression. So we have to place all of this within that context. It's within a broader context. And secondly, the learning journeys are examples. So if we move slightly further on in the guidance, it's up to schools to actually look at, you know, who they've got in front of them, their own learners, and say, what might their learning journeys look like? So it really is, it has to be related to individual contexts.
Yeah. And as we all know, there's enormous variety in classes of children as well at particular ages. Yeah. I'm just wondering, Hayley, because you've just seen this for the first time, and Phil's thinking this is being developed as a potential support for, you know, for teachers. I know you want to go away and look at it and take it in, but what was your initial response or reaction to
it? So far, I really like it. I love the layout that you've done, Phil. It's showing the progression. It's easy to access, certainly for teachers. You know, you broke it down for us so we know, and we consider the cohort of our children, like Tanya just said. You know, we're not all going to fit in that one box in the early years. There might be some children that are more able to, and you know, more articulate, and we could look at the further steps along. So I love the layout so far, and I'm sure other teachers would agree with me as well.
Okay, well, we're going to look at this as potential support material at the ASC, aren't we? So that's helpful, thank you. And that was helpful too, Tanya. Okay, Phil, do you want to round this off?
Yeah, I've got 3 slides. I'll just talk through them. I won't show them. There's an element that there are the key links with the other areas is an element that is being stressed within the curriculum. So if you can do stuff with the other AOLEs, then actually that's a really good way of being able to transfer their knowledge from one aspect to another, and that's good for learners. There's a nice point, set of questions that's within the guidance. It comes at the end for pupils to consider, sorry, not pupils, for teachers to consider, and for schools when they're designing their curriculum. I think they'll be really helpful as well. I'll send this as a PowerPoint out to members and also to schools as well. And then finally, they're talking about inclusivity, education in non-maintained nursery settings, and education other than school, so improves and things as well. So those are the things that round off the guidance. But in terms of us, it has been designed that it can be adopted as an agreed syllabus. And actually what I wanted to do was to show that actually there's enough there for schools to take and say, well, actually, yeah, we can do a good thing with this. We can create a curriculum that meets the requirements, as Hugh has mentioned already, but actually we can develop with our pupils because we know our pupils and our communities. That's it, Roger.
Okay, well, before we leave that and go on to look at the, I think it's supposed the LA adopting the agreed syllabus, can I just ask, just fire a couple of questions that people, the lay people particularly, and that included me. This is a bottom-up curriculum, but ultimately, at the top end of this, there are examination boards who've got to set exams with schools who are designing very different curriculums. And so immediate response to that is thinking, well, that's not going to be easy at all. So I think there's an answer to that. So could you just take us into that?
Yeah, this happens in any area of the curriculum. So imagine year sort of 7 and 8, when you've got lots of pupils from different primary schools, and you say, right, who's done the 5Ks, Sikhs 5Ks? Who's done the 5 pillars of Islam? Who's done creation from? And actually what you find out that pupils have done lots of different things depending on what school they're from. And now one teacher might go, oh no, because that means for that group I've got to go and teach the 5 pillars, and for that group I've got to go and teach this, and for that group I've got to fill in all the gaps before I can start to take all my pupils forward. Well, actually, if you think about what the 5 pillars and what the 5Ks and what the 10 commandments are, they're part of the authority within that particular religion or that particular belief. So a teacher might say, well, actually, let's focus on authority instead. Let's focus on the influence that has come from those experiences that you learnt in your primary school, and that you learnt in your primary school, and that you learnt in your primary school. So rather than focusing on specific knowledge, you're looking at the idea of authority, or why people Now, when you're examining that, that's a lot easier than examining maybe the 5Ks or the 5 or whatever, because you're not asking questions about what do Muslims believe about X, Y, and Z. What you're saying is, can you give me an experience or an example of how a person of faith may follow authority, or how a person without faith may understand authority. Now, pupils then express that answer, or are able to answer that with the knowledge that they've learned, but it's the concepts that's being examined. Now, I think I wouldn't say it's a relatively easy, because it's not easy, but I think that's what the examination boards will be doing, is they'll be going, okay, we don't necessarily know what you've learned, but we know that it'll have been around the idea of these particular concepts. Let's ask the questions to be able to unpack the concepts, and then pupils will give an answer, and that answer will help the examiner know whether they understand the concept or not. So in a way, the knowledge is a vehicle in which a pupil can express their understanding of these big concepts to do with religion and belief, which I like, actually. I think it's a nice way of being able to unpack RE or RVE. Does that help, Roger?
Yeah, it does. Well, I obviously knew the answer because I'd asked you before. Yeah. Well, I found that really helpful. Yeah, I was worried about that as an issue, coming at the curriculum as as bottom up, and so you took me into that. And there's obviously a clear way through there for the examination boards to access a whole wide range of different learning experiences in the schools on a thematic basis. So that's really helpful. Okay, So just one other thing. You said to me, again, because the bottom-up curriculum, it's been developed within schools like people like Hayley. As Hugh said, there's enormous opportunities now for teachers to express their creativity in putting together curriculum. But of course, we are significantly short of specialists in Wales. I don't mean right across the board, and so we have a lot of non-specialists who are going to be participating within this particular process. And you said to me that textbooks, which will never have been developed anyway at this stage, are going to be anathema as far as even, you know, progressing into the future.
I think what in our conversation about specialists, I think you and I know as people who've worked in schools that RE is often taught by a non-specialist, especially in sort of Key Stage 3. In one school that I taught in Chester, I had 7 non-specialists teaching RE, but that's different to having no specialists in a school, and we're talking high school here specifically, but there is still, I would say, as many professional sort of RE teachers within a high school as there always have been, and then they would design their curriculum and support the teachers who are non-specialists. So I don't think the position's particularly changed. It's always been a subject that's Key Stage 3 has always been taught by non-specialists in a lot of schools, but there has always been a specialist in a school to support those non-specialists. I still think that that's going to be the case. In most schools, they will have a specialist RE teacher. I think the difficulty comes is that there is this sort of understanding that it needs to be a bottom-up curriculum. Actually taking a textbook and what that says about something isn't good enough, which in my mind, the textbook's been written by an expert. I think this was our conversation. The textbook's been written by an expert in religious studies or in RE. So actually there is a relevance in the content that's in that book, but actually how do you apply that to the people that are living within my area and around my school? That's going to be the difficulty, isn't it? So it's sort of stating, well, actually, one of the things that we've discussed is actually looking at the Hajj, which is a pilgrimage to the other side of the world by people that I may never meet within my own social, cultural sort of circles. But actually, if you find somebody that's been on the Hajj that lives around your school or that lives in the county of Conwy, it suddenly brings that journey to life, because it's not somebody that I've never, or I don't really meet, or I'm not going to meet somebody who's been on Hajj. It's somebody that lives in Conwy that's been on Hajj, and they've been able to talk about their experiences. And all of a sudden, this journey that's on a screen or that's in a textbook suddenly becomes more, it becomes to life, because actually one of my community, somebody who lives in my local area, is actually talking about this particular experience. And that brings something that happens the other side of the world that actually it brings it on my doorstep, and it makes it a lot more relevant. So actually there's a lot more opportunity for that to happen in the new curriculum. The content is very similar, but actually the way pupils experience that will be very local, or I hope.
It's going to put an enormous weight, I think, as well on teachers, I have to say, though, given the fact, and it'd be interesting as well, that obviously the quality of what is actually produced will vary according to the talents of individual teachers in different schools. And we had that fantastic presentation at that kind of the lowest level from Hayley there, which was absolutely fascinating. But Hayley's a very committed teacher, and you know, so it's going to be very interesting, because I mean, Eston aren't going to make the kind of judgments they used to make, but there is going to be quite a variety in terms of the quality, and I just wonder how that will play out. And that's not only in RE, that's going to be right across the board. So it's interesting to see how that plays out in the long term, and how governors particularly might have a look at that as well. Okay, we move on to supporting the LA in adopting agreed syllabus. First of all, can I just remind you that in section 9 of the management plan, we actually looked at the whole issue here, and we agreed certain things which need to be therefore built into the process of setting up the ASC. I could read them out, but I'm sure you could look at them at home. And then on top of that, we've got the membership also statutorily states that obviously we've got to have an individual from each of the groups that make up SACRE, but we also wanted the option which is built into the guides as a possibility, I noticed, to bring in additional teachers, specialists and so forth into that particular group. And then we need a set of criteria for that group to take on board. And you'll have seen as we went through as Phil skipped through it on page 26, the government already wants us to look at questions in relationship to the ASC in terms of their work. And we'll need to take that on board anyway and look at that. But Phil and I also were looking at the whole range of additional things that we might criteria that we would want to pick up, and that's in your supporting paper. Interestingly as well, this is just by the by, but it says that the appointment of the chair of the ASC, it doesn't say who decides it. It said the LAA can appoint, or the group themselves can elect a chair, but there's no guidance. It doesn't say who and who's the responsibility for making that decision. That's just a small, I think, omission in there. So in terms of the criteria, we actually, Phil and I produced a list of criteria in addition to the questions that were being asked in the legal guidance, and you've had a chance to actually have a look at those. Are they, you want me to go through? I'm sure you've read them, that's just why we sent it out. Do you think that they are enough? Do we need more? And are they adequate? And that is really over to you. Got my hands up. So if are we happy to pick up those therefore as criteria to forward to the ASC? Because in a sense, we're actually devolving our responsibility to this group, which will meet and make its own decisions eventually and come back with recommendations to us. So are you happy with those? They are part of the delegated process to the ASC. Getting a few nods here. Okay. Okay, I will take a vote on that, and we could work through that very quickly then. Faith representatives, if you're happy. Yeah, unanimous. Council. Teachers. Yeah. And we have Erin hasn't made it, has she? Right. Okay. Okay, so that will be going to the into the ASC, which is actually going to take on place on the 10th of March, I think it is, Phil, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't know, when we actually get into the ASC, I imagine there will be a number of possibilities. When we have 1 or 2 full meetings, it's a lot to get through, or it might be possible, given the fact that we're hopefully going to pull on board, and Phil's going to be advising on that, additional membership in that particular group, that we might delegate some of that work and then to come back to the main ASC. But that's for the group themselves to decide. Any thoughts on that before we move on, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we can adopt an agreed syllabus, or that we can advise that the local authority adopts an agreed syllabus as quick as possible, because September 2022 is looming very, very quickly, and schools need to have that confidence that whatever they plan will not then have to be scrapped because they're going to need to plan something else because the agreed syllabus has changed. So I think we just need to, on that 10th of March, if by the end of that meeting we can say, schools, the agreed syllabus is this, and actually supporting material will be developed as a result of maybe further meetings, that will be great, but they can have the confidence to go ahead and plan around that particular agreed syllabus. There is a couple of odd things. We need to have a version of our own, so we can't have a link on a Conwy website to the guidance and say that this is our agreed syllabus. We need that guidance, and we need to have it on a Conwy website with a Conwy logo and a Conwy agreed syllabus statement. Now that provides an opportunity to give us an introduction, maybe from Roger and from Lowry, and then we're going to need to state that schools, children in year 8 are going to have to do the exemplar framework or the current agreed syllabus in 2022, and then year 9 in 23, etc., etc. So we need to make sure that that's available. But as long as we can get out to schools as close to the 10th, have a look at this guidance, because this is substantive, our agreed syllabus, then I think schools will be happy.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about that. I mean, it's very clear from the guidance was so late coming out, but it makes it very clear that there's enormous urgency, in fact, in terms of timelines from the teacher's perspective on this one. So I think that what you're suggesting is that it might, when we get there, it might be in a syllabus that's actually going to, the principles that are actually going to inform that and get on with that and agree, and then develop.
Chair, can I just suggest that you turn your camera off? The sound's gone really bad.
Maybe including some of the omissions that might come from the support material you're going on. So you've been breaking up for quite a while for me. Is that any better? Hello? No?
No, if you turn your camera off, it tends to improve the sound.
Allowing me to penetrate the... done it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Can you hear
that sounds better, yeah.
Great, great. Okay. You had a... Can we move on then, Phil?
Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. The update on the action plan. In fact, I had COVID during the meeting that Phil had with Lowry in relationship to the conference and also the management plan. And so can you just take us through that, Phil, and feedback?
Yeah, this is very quick. I've been through the education, the action plan, and I've updated it with all the things that that we said that we would do. The only thing that we've not been able to do is the teacher network, but there is a link with the GWARE Humanities local networks that we're drawing on for that. So whilst we've not been able to do that explicitly, we are still working ahead on some of that. Welsh Government are working on professional learning resources, and they will be available. So there's a lot of reference in the management plan about resources to help and support our teachers. I don't see why we don't take into account the stuff that Welsh Government is doing. They're doing a big job for us, so we need to draw on that. It brings consistency as well across Wales if we can draw on that, rather than, I think we need to find out what they produce before we decide what we are going to produce, so we can produce in absence rather than produce in repetition. That's about it, really. We are on track. There is a lot for the summer around collective worship, and then trying to get teachers' views on the current guidance and what the guidance might look like. So there's going to be some questionnaires that will be coming out in the summer, but I'm going to be writing the spring newsletter, and in that newsletter will be a reference to the training that will be available from Welsh Government, as well as the adoption of the guidance, or hopefully the guidance as our agreed syllabus. I think that's about it, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Okay, if we could turn to WASACA to receive the minutes of the last meeting of the association on 23rd of November 2021. Do we need to vote on that, Sally? Can't hear me. Can you hear me?
Apologies, sorry, my mute button was stuck. On the minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just vote just to note them.
Right. Okay, we'll just vote to note the minutes. Okay, faith representatives. Thank you. Councillor. Teachers. Okay, that was unanimous. Okay. And part of that, there was a proposal to agree changes to the WASACA constitution. Phil, you were at this meeting very much as well. Most of those changes, in fact, are to do with organisation, aren't they? Therefore, I don't think we're going to spend hours in our meeting actually looking at that as an issue. But we were asked, as part from that, and as part of this whole process of SACRA's become and the new national curriculum, we were asked to pass a formal resolution recommending the local authority to support WASACA. So I did note that in those minutes as well, that WASACA in fact does intend, I think, right, Phil, in actually trying to take a more active support in the support of SACRA's and the relationship with the local authority. Am I right in that?
Yes, yeah.
So I'd like to propose a formal resolution, therefore, recommending that the local authority support WASACA, and this will obviously go back through your route, Chris, ultimately. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Thanks, Hugh. Okay, faith representatives, thank you. Council, teacher. Thanks very much. Okay, Phil, you were at that meeting. It was quite a long one. Is there anything else in those minutes? And they were absolutely looking at what's going on nationally at the moment in the progression of the national curriculum and the relationship with SACRA. So there's a lot of discussion and report back from the whole of Wales. But is there anything else in that meeting that you feel that we ought to be just taking note of before we agree attendance at the next WASACA meeting?
I think one of the things that came out was that the regions are providing support in very different ways. GWER are providing support, facilitation support for the schools to develop it themselves. I got the sense that in the south there's a little bit more advice coming out from the regional bodies, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like as schools, because hopefully schools will be able to stand on their own 2 feet and develop their own curricula. They don't really want advice is one thing, but actually too much interference from regions, it may not do what Welsh Government wanted the curriculum to do in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and how that facilitation, I think it's working really well in the north, I've got to say, but I'm part of it. I might say exactly the same if I was in the south as well, you know, in the way that they're delivering it. But I just felt that you
can't pat yourself on the back, Phil, but we can.
Well, no, it's not. It's Gwere that's done that.
Reading the minutes, what was happening in the north just seemed to me to be more coherent in terms of the way it was evolving than it was in some of the other areas. That was my observation.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, it gave me reassurance actually that what's happening in the north is quite a positive experience. We'll see what happens as schools start developing their own curriculum. Colette's got her hand up.
Yeah, could I just add to that I was at the same meeting and I was extremely proud of the north. It really did come. I mean, Phil's presentation was so professional, so informative. I think that there were a lot of people at that meeting very envious.
There you are, Phil. So, and we certainly appreciate the professionality of your support for our particular group. And it's so good that we managed to get you back. And thank you again, Larry, for all of that support in actually doing that. Okay, attendance at the next WSAC meeting. Colette, are you going anyway? Yes?
Yes.
And Phil will be there anyway. So, yeah. Okay, I might join you possibly if I'm feeling better. But that firms up our support there. Can we agree on that? That at least our base support will be Colette and Phil. Okay, faith reps. Teacher, councillor, unanimous. Okay, great. Okay, right, we've got to sort out the dates of our summer and autumn meetings to finish off with. Sally, have you got any dates to offer us or suggestions to make?
Because we've got local elections happening in May, obviously we've got a long lead up into that, and then we've got an induction process for new members, so it couldn't be before the end of June. Right.
Okay. Well, can you offer us something at the beginning of July then?
Yeah, I can't give you a specific date now. I'd have to look at the meeting calendar, but I can come back to you on that.
Okay. So that'll be circulated to actually ascertain the date, and we'll actually get that out to you eventually. And we might as well do the same for the autumn, so we can plan ahead at that time. We normally have one, isn't it, Phil? Isn't it just normally before half term or just after half term, one or the other?
Yeah, around there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, remains for me to thank you for your attendance at this meeting, to apologise for my not so smooth as usual chairing of it. I only got 1 hour's sleep last night, I'm afraid. So I've been hanging on a bit here today. Well, thank you indeed, all of you. Anything that anybody wants to share before we leave?
No, I just want to reiterate, Roger, that I'm very grateful to Phil. You know, we were very concerned at one time that we were losing him.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see him back in his stride and advising us as well. And to the other people that are advising us on this committee, we're very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're very fortunate as well. I mean, Tanya's massively involved at the national level with this. So to have that kind of input from her when she feels we need to be, you know, made a little bit more aware than we are is really, really helpful. And there's a lot of quality. And I think, Hayley, you've got a role now, haven't you, nationally?
Sorry, say that again, Roger.
Have you picked up a role nationally now in terms of advising in some way?
With Expressive Arts currently.
Yeah.
But not with the RE as yet.
Yeah.
RBE.
So we've got a lot of talent and experience around this table, so I think we're very fortunate in our SACRE. So be good, and till we meet again, and I'll see some of you. Oh, that's Phil. We've not consulted who's going to be the representative. Sorry, everybody, on the ESC from each of the groups, the minimal representation.
Is there? I mean, we can just ask now. So we definitely need a councillor. So. Yeah. I mean, Chris is here, but there are obviously other councillors that are not. Chris, yeah. Are you able to attend on the 10th, Chris?
Just yeah, that's a problem for me. I've got full council this Thursday. I had full council last Thursday, so I'm going to have to be a bet on that particular Thursday. I can't take another Thursday off, so I'm not available really on the 10th of March. But I'm sure we could get one of the, well, who have we got? Councillor Mary, Councillor Julie. Yeah. Hopefully one of them could come, and Abdul's the chair. So
we're not legally constituted, Chris, until if we don't have one. It's as simple as that. So we can. I think it would be a good idea to circulate then, Sally, post this meeting, and find out the position there. With regard to people who are here on the faith side, particularly, any of you particularly want to be involved? Colette, so okay, that's Colette. Anyone else? Right, okay. I'm going to be part of it because we agreed that the management plan. Phil's going to be part of it. Hayley, would you be interested in coming on board?
Yes, definitely, Roger. I can make the 10th.
Great, great. Okay, so we have a minimal representation. We can circulate the members who were absent to give them the opportunity to actually come into a later point. Okay. Well, that's a good way of finishing. Okay, thanks a lot. Take care, all of you. Phil, could you hang around for a second before you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Can I just have a very brief word with yourself, Phil, and Roger, just about the agreed syllabus conference?
Yeah.
Are
Are you available in about 20 minutes?